Nicole, you have blown all of us away at TRT World with your reporting on this story, and you were there for the final days. What was it like to be there for the final push for Mosul?
Well, militarily, it was quite difficult to actually access. The Iraqi forces were so concerned because it was, as I said, a very fierce, hard battle fought in close quarters. It went from 500 square metres to 400 to 300, huge risks of friendly fire, very heavy coalition airstrikes were coming in. They were being called in, killing also many civilians who were trapped as human shields inside houses, while Daesh had positioned snipers on the top. So militarily, it was a very tough battle, those final few days for the Iraqi forces, probably the hardest that they'd had. And we heard a lot of reports of forces actually dying from friendly fire, because you had the counter-terrorism service on one side of this sort of small area of land, federal police on the other. It's a multi-pronged war involving many different Iraqi forces. And when it gets down to such a small area, it became very hard for the forces to sort of try and, distinguish themselves from each other. So I would say that was one of the most difficult elements that they were facing.
One of the images, some of the images out of your reports that is not only burned in my mind, but seared into a lot of the minds of the people that watched it, it's just the pictures of these emaciated, hollowed face civilians walking out of that rubble in Mosul. How traumatized are these people, Nicole?
You're right. Even for us, it was shocking to see it. As you said, when you describe the pictures, men walking out in their underwear to show to the Iraqi forces that they're not wearing a suicide vest, women walking out barely able to carry their bags and their children. As you said, they're traumatized. They're at the end of their tether. They'd had no food, no clean water for weeks, many of them just surviving on, very small amounts of well water. I've never seen people in such a state before. But, at the same time, I guess people are very resilient, and the people of Mosul seem to have been very resilient after 3 years of the hell of living under Daesh, 9 months of war. You would still get some smiles from people as they were escaping from the city, kissing the hands of Iraqi soldiers, just so utterly relieved to be out. Which goes to show, how dire the situation was that they had left behind.
And I mean, not just that, but you look at also the trauma probably for the Iraqi forces, seeing those people fleeing Mosul, not knowing who's friendly and who's not. Talk to me a little bit about the losses suffered by the Iraqi forces.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There was a lot of tension between the civilians and the Iraqi forces because, for example, the military is there to fight. They're not really there for the, protection and giving water and food to civilians. That's not their first role, but they were being forced into this role. They were very worried about the civilians because in those final few days of the battle, they had dozens of people coming up with suicide vests, blowing themselves up, a lot of injuries, a lot of Iraqi forces killed, also women, teenagers wearing suicide vests. So this was part of the final push by Daesh. And the Iraqi forces have suffered very heavy losses during this battle. They haven't released official information, but unofficial reports are that some units have suffered up to 40% losses. Now, the Iraqi forces and the government have wanted to try and keep the morale high. During the whole campaign, they wouldn't allow you to film injured Iraqi forces or, cases where soldiers are brought in from the battlefield. But they certainly took heavy losses during this whole battle.
Absolutely. A lot of bravery there. But here's the thing, no one wants this fight to be in vain. How do you make sure that Mosul doesn't fail after it falls?
It's a really difficult question. I mean, it's already failed for now. You could look at it like this, in the battle to save Mosul, has it been destroyed, particularly on the western part of the city? absolute destruction, no infrastructure. Even on the eastern part, which was liberated or cleared from Daesh, you know, months and months ago now, there's still no water, no running water, no electricity. And the other issue is, how do you address the grievances of the people who live in Mosul, who initially supported Daesh? And they admit it. They say when Daesh came in, they were like angels. That's the words that they use. You know, they were upset, they were disgruntled, they felt discriminated against by the Iraqi forces' presence in Mosul, as well as by the Shia-led government in Iraq. You know, unemployment, disenfranchised youth, all of these factors contributed initially to the support of Daesh in Mosul. And then the people tell you that after a number of months, they saw the group's sort of true colours, so to speak. So the Iraqi government knows that the ideology behind Daesh still exists. Daesh would have known that it couldn't hold Mosul forever. No doubt it has a plan in Iraq about what it will do next as it sort of melts into more of a guerrilla movement. And we've seen that in other parts of the country, you know, Fallujah, Tikrit, Ramadi, big bombings in Baghdad. I mean, they may be pushed out of the city, but it's certainly not the end of the group.
Nicole Johnston, thank you for your bravery in telling this story to us. Appreciate it.